4 o'clock, time to go green. All right, it's time to call to order the January 21st, 1 day late meeting for January of the Board of Public Works. Start with invocation. Lord, thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed on us. We come together today to do your work with your help and guidance. In doing this, look over our thoughts so they may be reasonable, logical, and beneficial to all affected by the outcomes. Watch over our workers who do dangerous jobs and guide us to success in all we do. It's by your hand that we are afforded free will and allow this will to benefit all us while serving you. In your name, amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Moving right along, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any comments from the audience? I didn't see a sign up, I didn't look at the sign up sheet. Okay. And moving right along to Darren's general manager report, please.
Thank you very much. I only have a couple items. One of the things I've been trying to do is kind of help share the value of what a Board of Public Works does and how it works for the community. And it seems like we've been kind of getting the negative side of things of late. One of the things, if we look at our mission statement, the purpose of the Board of Public Works is to provide safe, reliable utilities with excellent customer service at a reasonable price. And what I have in your packet today, I'll ask shows around, is talking about how we also take care of the community at a reasonable price. We went through and we selected 3 of our fellow utilities. We looked at the electric rates that we offer. Now, this is just a residential, and when you start looking at the rates, they change over time, they range over usage, et cetera, et cetera. But we just kind of put an average. We looked at a residential home that uses approximately 1,200 kWh in a month. And this is what the prices came out to be. It showed that for that 1,200, one of our customers would pay $165.43. Missouri Rural Electric, Northeast, they're an exceptionally good company. They do a very good job. They come at $159.98. Rawls County, again, they keep the lights on, $220.18. And then we look at Ameren, and Ameren is a for-profit organization. They come in at $173.78. Now, a couple of the things that we have to look at is when I often talk about comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. Because if you look at what a co-op does, what is their main purpose? They have one purpose, and that's to keep the lights on. It's electricity. They don't build a road. They don't build a sidewalk. They don't build a fire department. They don't pay for a fire department or a police department. All they do is electricity. Same with Ameren. Ameren is a for-profit, so you can recognize that they've got stakeholders and they've got people that they need to pay and give a return on investment for. And so again, we recognize that they would probably have a little bit higher rates. But if you take a look at what our rates are, inside of each one of them is either a pilot or a 5.5% payment that we give to the city. It's a transfer fee. And it's absolutely appropriate. We use the city's streets, we use their right-of-ways. We have access to that, but we take and we pay 5.5% of every bit of gross revenue that we make from the sale of our utilities to the city. And that's approximately a little over $1 million a year. Is that right, Paul? You can quote that for us, but $1 million a year. And that's, again, we're not complaining about that. But let's put this on an even scale. Let's make this apples for apples. So you come down just underneath the community support on our packet. If we were to take out that 5.5%, our rates would then drop to $156.81, which puts us approximately 2% lower than Missouri Rural Electric, 10% lower than Ameren, and 40% lower than Rawls County. And one of the interesting things is right now at the PSC, Ameren has before them a request to increase their rates by another 15.8%, which might be an interesting number if you look back at what we did 6 months ago as we were talking. So as we look at that, I would just simply say again, my mantra of late has been no good deed goes unpunished. We feel like we are trying to run a very good utility, and as we get kicked again in the shins, we're doing an exceptionally good job of providing exceptional service at a very competitive price. And we continue to do that with the best employees and the best efforts that we can in a safe and reliable manner. So that has to do with planning. It has to do with all of those good things that you as a board have supported us to do. And we get to have the voice of the people involved in it as it is anyways. So that's number one of my report. Number two, we've kind of kept up on the lead and copper rule. We have a new administration now on the federal level. There's been the lead and copper rule. We have come to you and said that it's going to take about 60% of our customers have lead in their service lines. We either know that it's there or we don't know, and if we don't know, we must assume that it is there. Right now, there's been 3 iterations of the lead and copper rule. Lead and copper rule number 1, LCR-R, and then LCR-I, and LCR-I says we're going to have to go all the way from the utility side of that service all the way to the home. There's 3 things that are kind of wrong, and we're part of the American Water Works Association, and 3 of those things that the American Water Works Association has taken back to the federal government to be a part of a complaint so that it has to be answered. One of the biggest things is private property. Currently, if we, as the Board of Public Works, we know that we own all the mains. But it has been the policy of the Board of Public Works forever that from the main to the home is the responsibility of the homeowner. That even in the road, as it comes off of that main, that's the responsibility of the owner. It's for the responsibility for them to build that. They bring it under the road into their property. At that point, we put a meter, and then they run it back into the home. Now, some of them have been in the home. That's another discussion. We're trying to bring that out. We like it that we have access to those meters. Again, different discussion. But we do not have the right or authority to go onto private property. We have the ability, if there's something being wasted, broken, or something like that, that we can shut it off at the meter, but we do not have any more responsibility past that. And in fact, if there's things broken prior to that meter that are into the road, again, that's the responsibility of the homeowner. With this law, we're not the only ones questioning whether we have the right to do that. So that's number one. So that's going to be that's a question that we need to have answered before we really go after how we're going to fix this problem. They are still saying, part number 2, the most recent LCR rule requires to replace all lead service lines and galvanized lines requiring replacement by 2037. And this is simply not realistic. If we had to go back, we've kind of done a little bit of looking at it ourselves. If we were to have all of these replaced in 12 years, we would have to have another crew, we'd have to have another vac truck, and we've got some of that. It's a placeholder that Paul's going to talk about in our 5-year plan. If we have to start, we're going to have to start somewhere. One of the things that they have said is, down to 3, we went through and we estimated that each service would cost right around $5,000 to $6,000 for us to have a crew, to have the equipment, 2 employees to go in to do the excavating, replacement of it, refill, get it back to operating level. That would cost us around 5 to 6. What they're saying on number 3, it says that each service line could average more than $12,000. Now, this is not just our numbers. These are actually national averages of what's going on here. So if we have 4,800 meters that we're going to have to do this on, and you're only going to do, let's estimate 10,000, we're still looking at $48 million in a 10-year time span. And we wouldn't, that would be horribly burdensome on every citizen here in Hannibal. So I simply tell you, we're watching. We're waiting. We're going to be talking to our legislators, both state and federal. We have a good voice where they are listening. There's a lot of people that recognize this. The question about private property is huge, and I think that should be kept sacred myself, that's something that has great concerns. And so that's just wanted to keep you as a heads up that is a very complex situation and that we're watching. Third item is talking about the power supply capacity and transmission. Very quickly, one of the things that happens, the reason we've got hit this last year with high costs was because the capacity charge for our electricity went through the roof. It's because there's become a junction where we have the amount of actual generation, coal and gas, and those that are reliable versus those that are intermittent, which is your renewables, solar, wind. And there's been a whole lot more solar and wind put in the service sector, specifically in Section 5 of MISO, which we are a part of, which is Missouri. We've also had coal plants get retired, which pushed that all the way to a breaking point where we were part of that. And again, I think you look at Ameren, who's going to have a rate increase of 16%. It sure seems familiar that we were doing the same thing. I think they've been hit as well. That's just a think, no proof. The auction itself happens in March 26th through 31st of 2025. This coming year, we have done a lot of work to make sure that we've hedged much of our coming year's capacity. I believe we're right around 72% hedged, covered, and that we're anticipating that we will be able to manage the remainder of that, and that we should be able to go forward with our electric rates as they are today, so long as everything goes as we anticipate, as our all of our consultants have shared with us, and believe we're in a good position. So the other thing that we don't have now is transmission. And so while capacity is coming, we will take those numbers come the end of March. That's when we start working on that budget. That's when that really becomes absolutely essential for that budgeting process. And that's when we'll bring you in and we have our budget workshops after we've got that plugged in and everything going the way it should go. But transmission, I have said often, there's three things we pay in our electric bill. Number one is the amount of electricity, the daily usage that we have every single day. Number two is we have to have the capacity, which is a number that we pay for once a year that gets put on our bill. And number three is we've got to get the power from the generation, from the coal plants, from the gas plants, from the solar to us, and that's transmission. And we are told we've got to start watching for that. We are not a transmission organization. There are those out there. The federal government is starting to put a lot of emphasis on it. And so that's something we're watching. We're seeing if there's some things we can do. We have through MPUA, they have actually participated in the construction of some transmission. We are a part of that. We've been doing that also to mitigate any future costs that are coming to us for transmission. So it's a very fluid item, but you'll see it becomes very difficult, but that's something, again, that we're just keeping an eye on. So that's the end of my report. Any questions, comments, or thoughts?
Isn't Ameren a generator
They kind of are both.
and a transmission
Yes.
and a retail supplier?
Yep. They're the big 800-pound gorilla in the MISO 5 zone. And all of, they're all of it. So
I'm sure each of those entities are separate corporations, so you have
They are.
Ameren buying from Ameren, buying from Ameren. Nice.
which, yes.
Also, when I was doing my little bit of looking into rates when we were needing to have the rate adjustment. The calculated average back 6 months ago in the state of Missouri is 14.3 cents a kilowatt hour. Compare that to our 10.9. What's that make us? 28% lower than the average, roughly.
Yes.
Is there any possibility, even though we're not located in Illinois, that we might be able to get demand at the same rate as where Prairie State's located, even though we're not located there, but we're a non-owner?
So that's we've got two things working there. Number one, we are part of Prairie State. And what we have to be granted, and it is a granting, that we get what's called a historical unit consideration, an HUC. And every year they let us know that with Prairie State, because we have been with them for so long, that we're able to, they consider that and they give us that, they grant us that. One of the problems that hit us last year is that we had gone out and gotten capacity. We had capacity both in Zone 5, but also in Zone 4, which is Illinois. And up to that date of the auction going to the cost of new entry, Cone, that had been considered and been left on our portfolio. The problem was that they said, okay, because they hit Cone, we draw the line and you can no longer get it. So we had a stranded asset in there that because it was in Zone 4. And we had been talking about actually getting capacity out of PJM, an entirely different zone, had worked at it and it didn't work out. But we had looked at, in the past, because of transmission, we had looked out there. We got slammed and said, you've got to stay. That no longer works. They changed the rules on us. So we are looking specifically for Zone 5 because we know it'll stay. And we'd have to have a purchase of power in a generation facility, and then they would have to grant us the opportunity, the ability to bring that into our zone. And that's not a sure thing.
At the capacity that we would generate.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Interesting.
have purchase agreement. We have the power in
We
a
can-
couple places, right?
We do. And so that's, again, there's capacity and then there's purchase
Okay,
power.
so that's capacity.
So there's, yeah, that's where, if that was your question, was capacity, that's
Yes.
purely capacity. And so that becomes, they've really locked it down into a very confined box. While we can purchase power just about anywhere. We have to take and pay for the transmission to get it to here. We could go buy it, if there was something in Florida, we go buy it there, but you have to pay for all of that transmission. And so we're very selective, we're careful about where we purchase from, but that's not capacity.
Right, so got it.
So
And then the transfer fee that's on the bill, is that part of that, or is it part of the transfer fee that gets paid to the city?
that, when we talk transfer fee, that's the city.
Okay.
So when you pay your bill, water, sewer, and electric, we take 5.5% of that and we send that to the city. That's the transfer fee we're talking
Right,
about.
but the
Not
bill,
transmit.
what,
Yes.
doesn't it say transfer fee on your electric bill? Is that paying for some of that cost? Or is that for something else? Am I
Ask your
confusing
question.
you? So on your electric bill, you have the service fee. Isn't there a transfer fee? Okay. What does that amount of money go for? Towards this transfer fee that we pay to the city? Or,
It's entirely.
Okay.
100% of that transfer fee on your bill is going right to the city.
okay,
It's kind of worded wrong. It should be franchise,
I,
but
yes,
whatever you call it. But that's what it is. Take the whole bill times 5.5%.
yes.
And it's basically the city tax or city franchise fee or their right to have it because, the city is the reason that we exist. So
I guess where my question's going is, you said we pay $1.2 million, I believe he stated. That's this money that we're charging the people though, right? Does
Yes.
that come out of, that doesn't So that's not generated into our financials.
When you look at your bill, there is the electric fee, and that's broken down into, I believe there's a meter charge and your actual usage charge. That is what we're charging you for that. And then there's the transfer fee, and that's figured out by taking that number. What's 5.5% of that? That's our transfer fee. That's also part of the bill, and that's what we collect.
Okay.
So we take that transfer amount, that 5.5 goes to the city. The remainder is what we then operate off of.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm gonna change subjects. I know it's not probably a part of what's going on here, but you remember I asked you a few meetings ago, I got something in the mail that I can pay this insurance company and they'll insure my buried pipe from the house out.
Yes.
And if something happens, they'll come in and fix it? Is that a worthy business for the BPW to potentially get into?
So the question is, back to that private property. What you're receiving, I think we were talking to
No, I'm
someone.
not talking about lead at all.
Right. And so they don't even put the lead into the equation. What they are is, some of you probably got it in your mail. I think it's $3.85 or something that a month that you can pay that. And when you have a leak on your side, they'll send a plumber in to fix it. Okay? That's beautiful insurance. The question would be, do we want to take on the liability of going on private property? That's the entire, could we take and start that business? We probably could, but the amount of insurance that it would cost to do that, we would have to have the skills, plumbing licenses, et cetera, that would allow us to go onto private property, do the work, and then be liable for that. And so what they're offering you is a insurance policy, roughly, specifically for your plumbing. And frankly, at $3.85, sounds all right. Now, are they a reputable company? You'd have to do some research on that individual company to see if it's worth your time.
I didn't check and see how much it was, but $3.68 doesn't sound like a big revenue generator.
Not a big one. Not a big one. And so that's what they've come, I've seen them in several places, and they're still in business and doing all right. So they've got their own mechanism, and I think what they're doing is they're taking the plumbers, they're responsible on private property, and
Oh, right.
moving forward. And so that's a different kind of that's what, if you guys wanted us to explore that, we'd have to take a look, but that'd be stepping into the
Kind of like a home warranty.
private,
program.
correct. It's a home warranty program.
Okay. I don't have anything else. Anybody else have any questions about Darren's report? All right. Having heard none, if we could hear from Mr. Munslinger regarding operations.
Good afternoon. You'll see it there in the board packet information for the month of December. The number of outages that went up compared to November, but our overall reliability also went up. Again, squirrels and trees are big causes of outages. To address the animal outages, our crews installed 112 animal guards, and we're continuing with that process as time permits. So hopefully the number of animal-caused outages will continue to decrease. On the water treatment side of things, you'll see that we're comparable to what we were in November as far as water production, and December's water production was above what it was the previous 2 years. One big thing at the water plant is we continue our public outreach by allowing tours, and during the month of December, the Leadership Hannibal group that is put on, I believe, by the Chamber of Commerce, held an event there and actually toured the water plant. So, and the big thing there, project-wise, was we completed the gravity filter project. That was something that started about April of last year, and so we're looking to see some improvement in the finished water quality going into our GAC facility. So, again, that was wrapped up. Filter 4 was returned to service, and I've not heard of any issues with the operation. Water distribution side of things, we replaced a 2-inch main, or installed a new 2-inch main along Pearl Street. It only served a couple meters, and so we've had continued leaks on there. And so rather than try to repair something out in the street, we pulled it off the edge of the street and repaired that with as minimal impact to the street as possible. It's something we're trying to do as we go renew and replace some of these older mains that are causing us more and more headache. And then we're also installing a new main on Columbus Road, tying a main there in with what's has been installed as part of the Vista Way apartment complex there off the edge of Stardust. Wastewater plant, you can see that the flows jumped up a little bit during the month of December, and that was due to that rain event we had there in the mid part of the month. Wastewater collection, we had big news there was we had our foreman who had been with the organization 18 years retired, and Justin Brown was appointed or selected to fill the foreman position. Previous foreman was Ron Lee. NISC, we continue to evaluate and try to find the cause of an issue that occurred with billing back in November, and it was found to be due to the 24 hours in a day due to daylight savings time. And so it addressed that, or caused an issue with some of the billing that they had to correct, and something we'll have to keep in mind moving forward. And then big thing coming up on the IT side is replacement of the phone system. We've received notification that our phones are going to be obsolete, and so we need to start moving forward with replacement of those. And then at the back of the operations report, you'll see the monthly totals from the business office. I'd entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Who will handle the decision on what phone system to replace yours with?
That's
Matthew?
typical. He'll lead it, yes.
We'll go through and review multiple proposals.
Yeah.
Features will determine where we go, because we do require some specific features.
Okay.
We have a lot of folks that have the ability to work during inclement weather that we have to be able to support properly as well.
What we do is we have an executive team, and Matt, myself, Paul, Matthew, and Beverly of HR, we're a part of that team. And so we meet regularly, and Matthew will bring that information into us, and as a team, we will make the best decision we can.
Cool.
So that's how we make a lot of decisions, is that very way.
Right.
Matt, will the potentially cleaner water going into the GAC system extend the life of the filters?
That's what we're hoping, yes. We're looking at several things to hopefully get longer run times between the exchange of that media.
Cool, good deal.
When will the exchange start over again?
We do exchanges quarterly, and so I don't know exactly when Lance has the next 2 vessels scheduled, but it works out right now that we're changing each vessel once a year.
All right. Anybody have any other questions of Matt, Mr. Munsler? If not, you could move right on to projects, please.
All right, like I mentioned, the gravity filter project at the water plant is complete. We had to walk through on December 20th. There was a few items that the contractor had to clean up, and he's since got that completed. Water loss is something we're continuing to tackle with the recent weather. It's kind of slowed the progress with installation of some meters that have come in. But again, we're just trying to get better understanding of how the water is moving in the system so that we can better pinpoint where some of this water is going. I mean, we've had the acoustic listening in, the big one was 2 years ago, and then we've continued doing the I can't remember, we had somebody come in every year and do some listening, and they're not finding big leaks. We've got the meters at the water plant to a point that we can agree that they're probably not the problem. And so, again, we're just trying to work, what's the next logical step in identifying where some of this water is going. So keep you updated as we move forward with that. Downtown SSO elimination project on the sewer projects. Again, we did all the lining of the 15-inch diameter and smaller mains this year. And so now Alex is working on phase 2, which is all those mains larger than 15-inch diameter. So hopefully this summer we're able to complete some of those. North Street storm sewer, last few weeks has been pretty slow with weather and temperatures. Had a conversation with the engineer today. They're supposed to be back on site tomorrow morning and continuing that project. As part of that project, they're also going to replace the sanitary sewer main that is just adjacent to it because they've got to pump around it anyway. They got to take it out of service and pump around their excavation anyway. So they're going to go ahead and replace that at our cost. And then phase 2, which will be the same contractor, S&A Builders out of Fulton. That'll start sometime mid-March, maybe as late as April. But we're having a public meeting on March 4th between 5 and 6 p.m. at City Hall for anybody to come and learn more about it. The engineer is going to go out, or one of his inspectors will go out in public or personally invite all the businesses and residents along Webb Street and Mark Twain Avenue so that they're aware of this. And if they have any questions, be able to answer them at that time, or they can come attend this public meeting. And then the third phase is the WRDA funded phase. Right now we're in the process of finalizing design. We had a meeting with MoDOT last week, and there were some things brought to light that the engineer would like to get corrected before he finalizes these plans. So that's what he's working on right now. And then Bear Creek Dam spillway improvements. We're just working through the paperwork that has to be completed by the contractor and approved by MDNR before that moves forward. Electrically, Indian Mountain Substation work is ongoing now. They've done a lot of the site grading, a lot of concrete work is either completed or in progress. We met with the company that is going to move the transformer on site, and we decided that probably April timeframe is the best for it to show up. So they're going to continue to store that down in St. Louis and move it up here when we're ready for it. And so that continues to move forward. And then at the bottom of page 3 of my report, you'll see some of the project highlights from 2024. Just go through them real quick. We completed new roofs on the Pleasant Street Booster Station, the water treatment plant, and the pump house. We also completed the rehabilitation of the gravity filters, which included new flow meters on all the finished water mains leaving the water plant. Sanitary sewer, we completed the rehabilitation of clarifier number 3, actually blasted all the metal parts of it, had it painted, and also etched the concrete and had a new polyurea coating applied that is easier to clean and extends the life of where that concrete, the cement was being eaten out of it and just the exposed aggregate. So that'll have a 15 or 20 year life expectancy that extends that life of that asset. Stormwater, we got the North Street project going on. We got the Bear Creek Dam spillway project going on. And then electrically, we completed the design of the new Indian Mountain substation. We got it out to bid for the installation contract for all those materials, and they began construction on that. And then the transformer, which was ordered a year and a half previous, was delivered to a site in St. Louis and is waiting delivery up here once we're ready for it. So we got a few things that were completed and were started last year.
Nice. Anybody have any questions about Matt's report? Nope. Nope. If not,
Thank
we
you.
move on to financial. Thank you very much.
All right, well, let's dig into the financials for December. We'll start with the balance sheet where we look at our assets, liabilities, and equity. For December, total cash did continue to decrease by about $500,000 from the previous month and is now down about $2.1 million compared to a year ago. As we've stated the last few months, we do continue to see the higher fall capacity charges, and we do have the ongoing capital projects in both the electric and water funds. Again, those reductions in cash are offset by increases in an asset, which is our construction in progress, until we finalize those assets and put them into service. We did also see a significant increase in accounts payable. We do have several debt service payments in January, and so that is where that increase came from. And then utility-wide total assets are up about 0.7% from a month ago and are about 0.6% less than a year ago. So for the income statement and comparing that to our budget for December, we did have a significant net loss again, utility-wide in December. The electric fund's net loss was about $1.1 million, which was significantly more than we had budgeted. We did have Prairie State that was down for almost the entire month of December, and so that resulted in us needing to buy the majority of our energy out on the market, which was a bit more expensive. Really, Prairie State had been on a good run for us, other than some small outages in their normal annual fall outage that they did. They really hadn't had any significant issues in probably 2 or 3 years, and so this was the first one that we've had in quite a while where both units were actually down. Fortunately, they got both of those units back up in early January before this cold snap, and so they've been running over these last 4 days of really cold weather. But that did result in the higher purchase power costs. We did also have 2 higher MISO invoices for the fall capacity costs that were higher, and we'll now see lower capacity costs for the remainder of the winter. And then those will ramp back up again in the spring based on those auction prices that we've talked about. On the water fund, we did not have a carbon changeout expense this month, and so we had a positive month in water. And then sewer fund had operating expenses that were about $63,000 more than budgeted. I did want to note that all 3 funds did recognize additional medical expense in December, and that was due to an extra payment that was made to our insurance fund. All of this year, we've seen higher claims costs coming in, and so we did have a need to replenish funds in that insurance fund with the city, and so we contributed our 40% contribution there. Looking back a year ago, due to those higher purchase power costs this year, the electric fund did perform much worse this year. It came out to be about $968,000 more in purchase power that we paid this year compared to last. However, kilowatt hour sales were up about 3.6% this year, but we're still about 0.6% less than the 5-year average. The water and sewer funds also performed a bit worse this year than last. Both funds were plagued by lower revenues and a bit higher operating expenses. All right, so year to date, we're now halfway through fiscal year 25. And so when we look at our budget that's updated to reflect our 9% rate increase and capacity amortized for the full year, the electric fund now sits at a net loss of $2.5 million. That's about $534,000 more than what we had budgeted. Purchase power is driving that negative or that net loss as it's up about 6.6% more than budgeted. The water fund is also behind budget this year. Like I've pointed out before, we are going to recognize 1 extra carbon changeout expense this year. So we'll have 5 on the books, even though we do those quarterly. We did not get 4 recorded a couple of fiscal years ago due to timing. And so lastly, the sewer fund continues to operate behind budget with the compressors that continue to give us issues. We are continuing to rent an electric generator there at the wastewater plant to assist in that process, which is expensive, but much, much cheaper than using liquid oxygen in that process. And so, as we've stated, those new compressors are on order and are expected to arrive in April. And so we do anticipate their arrival to help out there. Looking back a year ago and comparing year-to-date results, our utility-wide net loss is about $884,000 more this year than it was at this point last year. Just to give the numbers, revenues are about 5.5% more. However, net purchase power is 16% more this year, and operating expenses are 4.7% more utility-wide. Other information that we've got included in your packet, we've got our check register for December, which shows every single wire and check that went out the door, as well as a credit card statement for December, cash reserves for where our reserves are as of December 31st, as well as historical reserves for the last several years. We've got our current investment listing, which you'll see continues to decrease as we have investments mature. We're reinvesting fewer of those due to the need to replenish our operating cash that we're seeing that reduction in every month. And then our last thing is the dashboard, the key performance indicator dashboard, which I'll direct your attention to now on page 26. Looking at our debt coverage ratio after the negative month in the electric fund, the debt coverage ratio now sits at a negative 4.58. We've pretty well deemed that we're not going to meet that coverage ratio for fiscal year 2025, which is 1.25. And so we have informed our bond counsel as well as the bond holders in our annual disclosure filing that we do that we're not going to meet that covenant, or we're highly unlikely to meet that covenant this year. And based on the hedging that we did in our purchase power for next fiscal year that Darren talked about, we do anticipate being back in compliance with that coverage requirement by fiscal year 2026. The water fund saw a slight decrease in the covenant down to a 1.52. Sewer also saw a reduction down to 3.32. And the last thing, or I guess a couple more things, on our credit card statement, a couple purchases I wanted to clarify on just for the board's knowledge. We did have a purchase with Rio Grande here in town. That was for our Thanksgiving lunch. So what we have is an employee activity fund that we've talked about before, where employees are able to contribute to a fund, and then out of that fund we have appreciation lunches, holiday lunches, and activities, things like that. Each union employee also has a portion of their union dues that goes into that fund. And so Rio Grande was for Thanksgiving, and the employee activity fund reimburses us for that. The same thing was for Logues there on December 20th, I believe, 19th. That was for our Christmas meal, and so that will be reimbursed by that employee activity fund as well. And then there was also Yummy's Donuts. When an employee retires, we have a policy that states how we handle that retirement, which includes a cake and punch and things like that, up to a certain dollar amount that we'll do. The employee can choose to forego that retirement party if they so wish, and can choose something else if they choose to, or forego it altogether. This particular employee was fond of donuts, and so that's why that purchase was there to honor him in his retirement. We do anticipate a call tomorrow from S&P Global, the 22nd, on our rating in our electric fund. Like we've mentioned before, the S&P Global had reached out in noticing the last couple of years of negative performance from our audited financials. They've been assessing the financial condition of the electric fund, and they will inform us tomorrow of their results, whether that be the same rating that was there before, which was an A-, or a possible downgrade. We don't know, but we should find out hopefully tomorrow. And again, that affects our financial standing going forward for any future financing that we were ever to do. Obviously, if it can be downgraded, it can be upgraded as well in a future setting. So definitely let you know about those results. And then lastly, you have a hard copy of the audit report for fiscal year 2024, finally there in front of you. And so we've went over that several times, but that is just for your knowledge and your records if you would like it. Any questions on the financial report for December?
I don't believe so.
I had one,
there we go.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I saw a SAK construction. Which project is that covering?
SAC is sewer lining.
Oh,
project.
okay.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
For any of that, your capacity fee, you project any recouping of that net loss during the cheaper purchase times? If I'm getting that right. It's capacity.
Yeah, so we,
So I think you said roughly $500,000 if we were over there.
right, yeah, so the way they bill us, the total capacity that we'll pay for fiscal year 2025 is about $4.6 million. And so the majority of that is in the three fall months and the 3 spring months. And so, yeah, the 3 winter months that we're in right now will be a little bit less. The way that I've tried to reflect it in our budget, though, is to amortize that capacity as if we pay the same amount every month. And that way it kind of tracks a little better with the financials.
So what's happened is you've got the summer was okay. And then we paid an extra 2.5 million roughly for fall. Here comes winter, and right now we're doing okay, but you still see Paul is, we've already lost that 2 million. It's gonna go up again. So coming this spring, we're gonna get hit in the teeth again, and we're gonna start losing money again. And so come the next
You're not gonna be able to recoup in the
summer,
set that loss.
right? So what we're saying is that then hopefully next year, again, if we have a decent capacity auction, we're going to be able to hold where we're at, and we should be able to see our reserves start to catch up to what we've lost.
Thank you.
Paul, did I misrepresent anything?
Yeah, I understand what he's asking. We are expecting to recoup somewhere, I think, around 800,000 during those lower capacity months. But yeah, like you said, nowhere close to the $2.5 million loss that we're at right now.
Question, Charlie?
No, I'm taking this in.
Okay. You had that look, man. I just said it.
It's in the ball time.
You got it.
Paul, can you cover again what it is that we need to comply with to keep the reserves at the right level? Is there a general policy, or is it our, what are we trying to comply with to keep the reserves up to, the total amount of reserves?
Yeah, so I guess there isn't anything that requires us to maintain a certain level of reserves. However, the reason that we have the 1.2 debt coverage requirement is to make sure that we are maintaining adequate net revenues every year to be able to keep reserves at a proper level to be able to pay our debt service. And so in a sense, it requires us to maintain an adequate level of reserves. The way that we operate our reserves are based on industry recommendations by Utility Financial Solutions, which bases the required reserve amounts in each fund based on several different factors, those being our annual operating expenses, our historical investment in fixed assets, our investment with Prairie State, just in the electric fund, and then the fourth one, I'm blanking on it. Oh, here it is. Fourth one being our total 5-year capital plan, which we're about to go over. So out of those 4 factors, each one is given an allocation, and that's what we base that reserve level on in each fund.
Well,
Yep.
Are your reserves tied into any kind of purchasing power? And the level of your reserve, does that have any impact on, again, like your purchasing power? You mentioned the auction.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. But
Yeah.
just in a general sense, does your reserve have an impact on purchasing?
Definitely, and I think it's the other way around. The level of purchase power that we would have to pay in a fiscal year would impact the level of reserves that we would want to maintain to the tune of 12.3%. So we take our total budgeted operating expenses for the fiscal year, which would include purchase power in the electric fund, and we shoot for 12.3% plus those other factors as an adequate reserve level. So it definitely plays a part in the minimum reserves that we would need based on that purchase power. So if it were to go way up, obviously it would increase our total operating expenses, and then vice versa. So that reserve level would change every year based on that cost. Is that answering your question?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, but several items that go into that purchase power, like we talked about, the energy, obviously the capacity, transmission, and then Prairie State as well. So it does fluctuate year to year.
All right, any more questions of Paul regarding the financial report before he goes into the 5-year capital improvement plan? All right, if we can go into the capital improvement plan.
All right, let's jump in. We did present the plan to you, or provided the plan to you last board meeting to give you some time to look through it and go over what we have included. Like we mentioned, here in just a little bit, we will ask you to approve the 5-year capital plan before we then hand it over to the Planning and Zoning Commission, as that's required by January 31st. And so I did point out on here just some of the highlights. There was very little that changed from last month to this month. However, we didn't go over it in much detail last month, as we wanted to give you a chance to look it over. But quickly here, the electric fund, we did remove the Indian Mounds project. We do hope to have that wrapped up by the end of fiscal year 2025. But there is a chance it could bleed over slightly into next fiscal year. And so we did go ahead and remove that project. And then project E1 is our Oakwood to Southside tie line. That is a 34.5 kV loop that is very important for us to complete. The unfortunate bit with that project is that those estimates continue to come in much higher than we had anticipated. And so with doing the 161 Oakwood project last year, the Indian Mounds project kind of last year and this year, we're going to take a couple of years off to kind of replenish those reserves a little bit before we probably jump into the Oakwood to Southside tie line project. But it is very important that we get that done, as we need to demolish that old 73 line, as that's what we've told Ameren that we're going to do. And so we did move that project out a couple of years. Project E6, that is just our fleet in the electric fund. We have a need to start thinking about replacing the service trucks. Those are the not the large line trucks that you see. Those are the smaller, kind of normal truck with a bucket on them that drive a lot more than those larger trucks, and so they do see a whole lot more miles as the guys that are on call take those home, and then they also bebop around over town depending on what's going on that day. And so we do know there's greater residual value in replacing those before they hit 100,000 miles. And the lead time on those smaller service trucks is about 2 years. And so we are getting up to a need to start replacing those. Jump into the water fund, project W8. We do have a kind of a new project, I guess, a new plan to start replacing our water meters annually. And so the plan is to do about 10% every year. It's kind of manufacturer and industry recommendation that you replace every meter either after 1 million gallons or after 10 years. And so doing 10% every year will get us to that recommendation. And so that we'll start doing that next year. Again, we just got all those AMI meters put in here in just the last couple of years. And so we'll start getting those replaced every year to ensure that readings do come in accurate and everything's working properly there. W15 and W16 are a combined project. Again, it's common practice in the industry to repaint your water towers every 15 to 20 years or so. And so our Veterans Road water tower was built in 2001, and our Indian Mounds tower was painted last in 2003. And so we're going to bid those projects together and anticipate that work kicking off in spring of 2026. Jumping down to the sewer fund, project S3, we have an annual project that we've had every year with our sanitary sewer overflow elimination. And so as part of that ongoing capital spending that we're doing to eliminate those SSOs, we do have a need to replace the sewer main along Warren Barrett. That would be from Grand all the way down to Main Street. That's a typical problem area for us, and so we will start that off with engineering to determine that overall cost before we get that completed. Project S6, we have a NIPDES permit for our wastewater plant. That expired back in April of 23. Prior to that permit expiring, we had submitted for a new one from DNR, but still have not received that new permit. And so we're able to operate under that old permit until we do receive the new one. However, we do anticipate some potential capital needs there once we receive that new permit. And so there's some uncertainty in project S6 on what that overall spend is going to be. It could be a couple $100,000, or it could be millions of dollars, kind of depending on where that comes out. And so some uncertainty there. Let's see, project S11 is an ongoing project. That's our clarifiers there at the wastewater plant, the giant arms that spin around. We rehabbed the first of 3 this year and got that project done. I think everything went well, and so we've got 2 to go there, and so that'll be an ongoing project in the sewer fund. And then lastly, one I did not point out, I failed to put on there, but also in the water fund, W2 is our lead service line replacement line item. Obviously, those numbers there in yellow have a significant amount of uncertainty to them. We wanted to get something in the plan to know that it could be very costly. However, we don't have an exact number or anywhere close to an exact number of what that could cost, and so we're very much waiting to hear more on that lead service line replacement and what our responsibility will be. So an overall summary shows much more accuracy in the next 2 fiscal years, so that being fiscal year 26 and 27, about $4.1 million of total capital spending next fiscal year, and about $4.5 million in fiscal year 27. The higher numbers beyond that you see are coming with a lot more uncertainty. And so there's some placeholder items in there, depending on those requirements that we could see. So kind of take those with a bit more of a grain of salt. But I think that's all I wanted to highlight on the capital plan. But before we ask you to approve that, I'm happy to answer any questions or Jared. We got Jared or Matt here as well on any questions on any of this.
Well, we know that the 4.8 million for fiscal 27, 8, and 9 is, stab in the dark, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, these all seem like they're in line as we've been talking about them for the last couple of meetings. Anybody have any questions about this? No.
No, I do not. My only question was the W-2, but he covered it, so.
And again, I will tell you, like I said in my comments, we don't know what's coming, but there's gonna be something. There's still gonna be that movement. We do wanna get that out. I don't think that's gonna go away. It's just whether they can push it out from 20, being done by 2037 or later. If they can ease that out, I see that happening. But again, these are placeholders that we need to keep in mind.
Is this something that needs to be voted on?
Yes, so the 5-year capital plan would be voted and approved, and then you will see it show up again on our budget that factors into the cash contribution or reduction in our reserves that we'll talk about during our budgeting time later on. But yeah, we would need a motion to approve the 5-year capital plan tonight.
And that becomes part of what we take to the city and the board. Where do we take it to them?
Planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning.
Yep.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the 5-year plan as modified and proposed here?
I'll make a motion to approve the 5-year plan.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Moving right along, do we have any comments from the city attorney?
No, I have nothing.
Ethan, we have talked a little bit over the last few months about establishing a 5th VPW board member. How do we go about getting that moving along?
I would have to look into it and whether it's actually in our charter or not. I do not believe it is. So that would be something that we would have to take up with the city council then.
Okay,
Yeah, it's in the charter.
it is in the
Okay,
charter.
that would be a charter change and we would have to take it to a vote of the people then.
All right, well, what's the first step in getting the charter changed?
So first step would be taking it to the city council, getting it approved, and then placed on the next election cycle.
All right. Any general discussion before we go into closed session? Oh, dang, almost forgot. Mr. McCoy. You're deserving it. Plaque of congratulations. And
If we can we have you, I'm gonna have you go right in that little kiosk right there in front of the sign so that Erica can get a good picture of it. You gotta smile. Is the lens cap off? I'm kidding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, can I get a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021 12 of the Missouri Sunshine Law, and then to convene in closed session, including the current board, Darren, Matt, Paul, Courtney, and Ethan.
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're in closed session.
Thank you all.